Hi, welcome to the first part of the series. And let's get started with MotionBuilder by touring the interface first. This is our viewer panel where we will include all the characters, props, background elements, foreground elements, sky elements, lights, cameras. So this is basically our virtual studio or virtual stage. On this part here, this is where we will have all the list of the elements that exist in our scene. Okay, so when we add cameras, we'll be able to see them here. If you add audio elements, it's gonna be here. If you add anything to the scene, you will see them under this scene tab or category. So everything will be accessible through here. This little part is our timeline. So it goes from 0 second to, right now it's set to 150 frames, but you can always change that. So you can come here and change the value. So double click and you write, let's say 800, so it adds 800 frames. This is where we will have the controls for the character, and then you'll get more ideas about what this panel is about in just a short while. This is our asset browser, as you see here. So when we start adding objects or elements into our scene, it will appear here. This is our animation layers, and again, this is something that we will deal with when we get into the animation part of MotionBuilder. And this is basically property controls depending on which object or which character you select. You'll be able to modify those right here. Okay, so that's a very short and fast tour of the interface. Now let's get into the file types. MotionBuilder works mainly with FBX files, and FBX files are important because it includes mesh data, it includes bones, it includes textures, lights, and animations, all contained in one single file. So it makes it a perfect file type for us to use in our projects, because we will be using pre-made characters, 3D characters that already have the bone system, and we will get those files from the internet. Now let's get into importing files. So how do we import files into MotionBuilder? As I mentioned earlier, we will use Asset Browser for that purpose. Now we're gonna use some built-in files or characters that come with the software, and they can be found under tutorials folder here. So as you see, it has a bunch of characters that we can use for practice. So I'm gonna start with this character called Maya Blue. So I'm gonna just drag and drop this onto my scene. So dragging and dropping is actually the basic way of importing characters or any kind of objects into your 3D scene. So once you release your button, you get this little menu, and then we get these sub options. Now if you have animations with takes, you will be able to find them here, but since there is no animation built into this character, I'm gonna just say no animation. So this is the character that I'm going to work with. Now that we imported our character, let's learn how to navigate in our virtual 3D world. Now to do that, we're going to be using two keys in our keyboard. One of them is Shift, the other one is Control. So if you press and hold the Control button on your keyboard and left click and hold your mouse and move it, it actually zooms in and out of the scene. In other words, instead of zooming in and out, it actually moves your camera in and out in the Z space. If you press and hold the Shift key and press and hold the left mouse click, it moves the camera left to right or up and down. Okay. Now, if you press and hold the Control and Shift key together and use the left mouse click and hold it, now you can actually orbit through your scene. You can go this way, you can go this way. Okay, so this is basically how you can navigate in your scene. So Shift to move your camera left and right and up and down. Control to go in the Z space and out of the Z space, and Control and Shift keys pressed together and the left mouse click, you can orbit around. Now that we learned how to navigate in our scene, let's look at the X-ray view. And what X-ray view is that after we import the character, we need to be able to see the bone structure of this character. So how do we see the bones of this character? Well, we go to Display and then go to X-ray. Now, shortcuts are always important because it saves so much time, enabling you to work much more time efficiently. Okay, so I'm gonna use the X-ray here or Control A. Now, when I press that X-ray button here, I get the skeleton view in my scene as well. So now I can see that this character has actually the bone structure. Now, how do we pose this character? The essence of MotionBuilder or any kind of character animation is that we need to be able to effectively pose our characters. Even in the animation, we have to pose them from a certain frame to a certain frame. So let's get into posing. Now, when it comes to posing, what we need to know is that there is basically two things that we change in every single or every kind of human animation. So no matter how complex of a motion that you perform, what you're actually changing in terms of computer animation are two things. One, the position of your bones, and two, the rotation of your bones. Okay, so just by using the position change and the rotational change in your bones, you should be able to get any kind of pose that you would like. So position and rotation changes are enabled within these two buttons here, or tools. Now the first one is called Translate, the other one is called Rotate. Now in MotionBuilder language, position change is called Translate or Translation, and the rotational changes are called Rotation. So if I want to move this hand, I should be able to select the bone first, and then move it down or up, or move it up and down or left and right, however you'd like. Now once you click on that, you get this little 3D gizmo here. This is the Y-axis, this is the X-axis, and this is the Z-axis, and you can actually see these here in the lower right hand corner of the screen. Okay, so if I want to move this down, I should be able to use this Y-axis. But look what happens when I do that. Ooh, so this doesn't look very natural at all, does it? So the reason why this is happening is because MotionBuilder still doesn't understand that this is a character. So we need to tell MotionBuilder that this is actually a character that we would like to animate. Okay, so let me undo that real quick. There we go. Okay, so the process of defining this object as a character is called characterizing. Alright, so the first step after you get a character into your scene is to characterize that character. I know it sounds a mouthful, but again, it all means that we have to tell MotionBuilder that this is a human character. Alright, so how do we characterize a character? Well, you go down here in this menu, and then you open up templates by clicking on this plus sign. And then we click or we select the characters menu here. And within this menu, we select this one here that's called character. So what we need to do now is to drag and drop this onto the bones of this character. Now, it's very important that when you take this and drag and drop, you don't drop it or you don't release your mouse here when you see the mesh. When you do that, it's going to cause some problems. So what you need to do instead is to drop this onto one of the bones. It doesn't matter which bone it is, but it just needs to be dropped onto the bone other than the mesh. Alright, so I'm just going to come here to select one bone. Maybe let's go here. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to release my button. So the moment you release this button, you get this button here that says Characterize. So I click on that, and it's asking me this question. Character must be in stance pose facing the positive z-axis. Alright. Now here we have to select if this character is a biped or quadruped. So what is biped and what is quadruped? Biped means a character with two legs, like human beings, and quadruped is a character with four legs, like cats and dogs. Right? So since this is a human character, we're gonna select biped. So I select biped. So what happens now is that now MotionBuilder knows that this is a human character. So ideally, we should be able to bring this hand down. So let's try again. And again, as you see, it doesn't work. Let me undo that. So that means we need to do one more thing, which is to add a control rig. Alright, so to be able to fully or naturally control this character, after characterizing this character, we need to add a control rig. Alright, so how do we add a control rig? First of all, once you characterize this character, we should be able to see a category here that says characters. And if you press the plus button, now that means that we have a character in our scene. Now the good thing is that we can actually rename this character, and it comes very handy when you have multiple characters in your scene, so you will know which character you are working with. So I always advise that you should be able to, or you should label or rename your characters in a descriptive way. So I'm gonna right click here on this character and click on rename. And the name of this character is Mia, so I'm going to call Mia. Okay, press enter. And once we do that, and if you come to this upper right hand corner, as you see, Maya is already selected. If by any chance, if it's selected to none, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to be able to add the control rig. So what you need to do first is to select the character. Okay, so we have Maya. Now the next thing we need to do is to add the control rig. Now if you see this character here, or this figure, like a silhouette without any bones, that means you don't have any control rig on that character. So to add the control rig, you have to go to source and go from none to control rig. And notice what happens to the character here when I click on control rig. It's asking me this question: what type of control rig do you want to create? Now you can have FK, IK, or IK only. Now FK, IK stands for forward kinematics, inverse kinematics. And we will have a special session on the difference between forward kinematics and inverse kinematics in a later session. But for now, let's make sure that we click on FK, IK. Alright? So the moment we do that, first of all, the color of the bones change. And then we see these lines and bones within the silhouette figure of the human being. Okay, so this is a little checkpoint for you, or a checklist for you. If you see the bones as yellow with these red balls, and if you see the lines and the dots here on our silhouette figure, that means we are ready to pose this character in any way that we want. So let's try to move this hand down once again. So I'm going to select this red ball, and again this is called actually an effector. So each of these red balls are called effectors, right? So I selected the wrist effector, and now I can bring it down. That's pretty cool. And as you see, when you bring the hand further down, MotionBuilder is so smart to understand that coming down this slope is not possible without bending the knees. So let me get a side view here. Okay, as you see, I was just actually moving the left hand wrist effector, but the whole body is changing, especially the knees. It's bending down. Okay, so it's a very complex system that is built into MotionBuilder. Let me undo that. If you want to go back to the T pose, you can click on this T pose icon or the stance pose. Okay, so now we can come here, you can bring the hand forward if you want, you can bring it down a bit, you can take this bone here and you can bring it down just for the kneeling. You can even rotate it. So if I go to the rotation tool, you can come and rotate if you want to. You can, let me go back to stance pose one more time. This time I'm gonna focus on the head. Okay, so I can take the head effector, so I can move it left to right or up and down. Okay, so I can take this one. I'm again on the rotation tool, so I can use this to bring down, this to bring down here like that. Perfect. Let me zoom out. I can take this and use the translation tool. By the way, you will find yourself in a situation where you will need to go back and forth between the translate tool and rotation tool all the time. So, coming here, clicking, and then or modifying the pose, coming back here to change the tool, and then come back to the character. It's a very time-consuming and tedious work. So, to save more time, or to save a lot of time actually, what you can do is to use the shortcut. Now, the shortcut for the translate tool is letter T, as in translate, okay? And the shortcut for the rotation tool is R. So T is for translate, R is for rotate. So I advise that you use this shortcut all the time to save a lot of time. Alright, so T. I'm gonna come to the side view. You can go like this. Okay, so you can have any kind of pose in the feet. You can take this one. You can bring it up if you want to. Okay. You can take this, rotate, bring it down, maybe head, bring it more down here. There we go. Or let's bring this down, translate tool. Perfect. So let me go back to the T pose again. Now, I want this character to pose in the sky or in the air. Okay, how do I do that? How do I bring this character up in the air? Now, if you take the pelvis effector here, and you can use the y-axis, realize that it doesn't go up. It goes down, but it doesn't go up. Why is that? Well, because both of the feet of the characters are pinned down. They called pin. So the right ankle and the left ankle effectors are pinned. What they mean is actually here, it's written here, pin translation and pin rotation. So these effectors are pinned in terms of its translation and rotation. So if you want to bring this character up in the sky, what we need to do is, I'm going to select the effector and uncheck the pin values there, or the pin properties. And the same thing for the left effector. Unpin, unpin. Okay. Now that none of my effectors have any pins on it, I'm going to select this bone here again, or the effector, and move the character up. Okay. So now, as you see, my character is up in the sky. So from here on, you can continue to pose your character. So rotation, you can do anything you want. Translate, Let me come this way. Oh, to select this one. Okay. Rotate. There we go. So you can have any kind of pose for this character. Okay. Now, this is basically how you pose the character. But if you notice, when you zoom into the hands here, we have actually different bones for each finger, and each finger has roughly 3 different effectors, 1, 2, and 3. But when you look at the control rig here, we don't see the fingers. So where are the fingers here? Well, if you click on this little icon here for the left hand, this is where we see the effectors for the hand. So you can take, for example, this one, use the translate. You can use it here, okay, or this one here. Now you can select multiple fingers. Let me select 4 only, and you can move them, as you see, okay, to make your life a little easier. Now let me show you the quickest way of getting a fist pose for hands, because that's a bit tricky to do. Now, to get the fist pose, what we need to do is to select this mode here, selection mode. Normally when you pose the character, we are either in full body mode or body part mode, okay? But now we're gonna use the selection mode. So I'm gonna go to the selection mode. I'm gonna select the rotation tool, and now here we are set to global mode. Instead of global, we're gonna select additive. So just to repeat again, you go to the selection mode, select the rotation tool, and go on to the additive mode. Once you do that, you come here. Let me get a better view. Okay, so now I can bring my hands in a fist pose. Okay, so then I can come here and take the thumb, and maybe let me see if the rotation will work. Nope. So I'm gonna use the T. Sorry, there we go. Rotation. There we go. Okay. If you get these bones and all the other stuff in your way, where you cannot see the pose in a clear manner, what you can do is go to the display mode and deactivate X-ray mode by going to the normal view. There we go. Let's double click to get out. If you don't get it, if you don't fully get rid of the extra materials there, you can go and select models only. There we go. Alright, let me get back to the T pose. Now let's learn how to pose your hands, and especially the fingers. Now, if you realize the hands come in this stiff mode, okay? So I want to, for example, get this in a fist pose, as if they're fighting with someone, right? So again, I'll go back to the X-ray mode here. Now, as you see, each bone, or sorry, each finger has actually multiple bones. So you have 1, 2, 3 effectors for each finger. But when you look at the control rig view here, we don't see any fingers. So where are they? Well, they're hidden in one of these two buttons here. So if you click one of them, you get the detailed view of the hands. So you can select one of the effectors here. I'm gonna use the translate tool here, and by the way, I have to be on the full body mode, so you can go like this. Okay, select the other one, right? Or you can select multiple effectors to modify all at once. So you can go like this. So you can bring it down, bring it like this. Okay, so you can play with these in any way you want. Now let me show you a quicker way of getting into a fist pose, for example, because getting into a fist pose is normally more difficult than the usual posing. So I'm going to go back to the stance pose or the T pose. Now to get into the fist pose for hands, what you need to do is to change your mode from full body to the selection. So you select the selection mode, then you go to the rotation tool, click on that. Well, I think my computer is stuck. There we go. Now, to pose fingers, okay, so how do we pose the fingers? Now, when you get a closer look at the fingers, or the hands in general, you see that we have actually separate bones for each finger. But if you look at the control rig view here, we don't get any views for the hands or the fingers. So where are they? Well, they're both hidden in either this button here or this one. So for the left hand, if you click on this button here, you get a detailed view of the hand, including the fingers and all the effectors associated with those fingers. Okay, so how do we pose the fingers? If you get a closer look at the fingers here, you see that we have different effectors for each finger, but we don't see it in the control rig. We don't see any kind of hand bone structure within the control rig view. So where are they? Well, they're both hidden either here or here. So if you click on this button for the left hand, we get a detailed view of the fingers. So if you want to move one of the fingers, you can select the effector and then you can move it around. Okay, and this one here. Or you can select multiple effectors at the same time, and then you can modify the pose with all the fingers, or with all the effectors selected. Alright, so it's pretty cool. Lastly, let me show you how you can get into a fist pose in a much more effective way. Now, if you want to get into the fist pose, I'm going to select the first 4 fingers here, and I'm going to use something called Additive Mode. And to access the Additive Mode, what you need to do is to go to the Selection Mode here, select the Rotation tool, and then come and click and hold with this global mode here and select additive mode, right? So 3 steps: selection mode, rotation tool, and the additive mode, right? So now that I did all those steps, what I can do is select the rotation tool here and do it. So as you see, the fingers are moving in a much more natural way. So I'm going to select the thumb effector here and then bring it closer to the hand. Okay, so to do that, I'm gonna get out of the selection mode and go to the full body mode and then bring it here. There we go. So now we have a much more natural looking fist pose. Now if you see all these extra information here getting in your way, so you cannot see the clear pose, what you can do is go to the display mode and select models only. Okay, and double click outside so you can get the pose there. Okay, I think this is basically the essence of the bones posing. Okay, so I think this is the basic introduction to MotionBuilder. So what we have covered so far is we toured the interface, we talked about the file types that we need to be able to okay, so I think this is a pretty good introduction to the core of MotionBuilder. So to recap, we talked about the interface, we talked about the file types, we talked about how to import files, how to change the views from normal to X-ray. We talked about how to navigate through in our 3D world. We talked about characterization and control rig. We talked about posing. And we also talked about how to pose our hands into a fist mode using the additive mode. In the next session, we will learn how to add motion into our characters.